The settler knelt in the rich, dark earth of their new homestead, fingers brushing the limp leaves of a tomato plant. A perfect circle of death radiated outward from the base of a towering black walnut tree. Within that radius, every bean vine sagged, every potato plant yellowed. Yet just beyond the shadow of the farthest branch, the meadow grasses grew thick and green, marking a stark, invisible border in the soil. Puzzled, the settler cleared the wilted vegetables and tried again with new seeds. They watered and tended the patch with care, but the same pattern emerged. Seedlings would sprout, then their stems would weaken and twist, their leaves curled inward as if scorched by an unseen fire, leaving the ground beneath the walnut's wide canopy perpetually bare and barren. The settler finally connected the devastation to the tree itself. They noticed how rainwater dripped from its broad leaves, and how the dark, rotting husks of fallen walnuts littered the poisoned ground. An instinct took hold. This was no blight or poor soil, but something the great tree was doing to the earth around it, creating a silent, deadly moat to guard its territory. That settler's observation of the barren circle beneath the walnut tree lingered for decades, a puzzle waiting for a more systematic mind. In the 1800s, a botanist finally arrived with leather-bound notebooks and glass specimen jars. He knelt where the grass refused to grow, his fingers digging into the dark, root-tangled earth. He collected not just soil, but the very materials suspected of the crime: brittle leaves, gnarled root fragments, and the black, rotting husks of fallen nuts that stained his hands a deep, persistent brown. Back in his study, the botanist carefully filled a series of clay pots with that suspect soil. Into each, he planted seeds of common garden plants, beans perhaps, or tomatoes. For weeks, he tended them with equal water and sunlight. But where control seedlings in normal soil stretched toward the light, these remained stunted. Their first true leaves, instead of a vibrant green, flushed a sickly, chlorotic yellow. They were being strangled from below, not by drought or poor nutrients, but by something invisible in the very ground that should have nurtured them. The experiment was a grim success. It proved the soil itself was toxic, a poison factory operating in slow motion. The botanist concluded the black walnut was leaching a substance from its entire being, roots, leaves, and decaying husks that saturated the earth. This wasn't mere competition for sunlight or water, it was chemical warfare. The tree was actively clearing the ground around it, creating a sterile zone where only the walnut's own seedlings, perhaps pre-adapted, could hope to survive. The botanist's failed seedlings had pointed to something in the soil itself. Decades later, in a laboratory filled with glass beakers and the sharp scent of solvents, researchers finally extracted the culprit. From the dark, decaying husks of black walnuts, they coaxed out a crystalline powder that gleamed with a pale yellow hue under the electric lights. They named the compound juglone. With precise scales and clean pots of sterile soil, the scientists began their tests. They mixed measured amounts of the yellow crystals into the earth, then planted the seeds of common crops, tomatoes, alfalfa, beans, and waited. The air in the lab grew still, heavy with anticipation. Within weeks, the results were unmistakable. In the pots laced with juglone, the tomato seedlings emerged but then faltered. Their leaves paled to a sickly chlorotic yellow, their growth stunted compared to the vibrant green plants in the untreated control soil. The invisible poison from the husks had been captured, isolated, and was now demonstrating its power in plain sight. Armed with their newly isolated juglone, the researchers moved from the laboratory to a controlled university greenhouse. Here, under precise conditions, they could finally witness the toxin's direct assault. A technician carefully measured a clear juglone solution, then applied it directly to the soil around the roots of a healthy, potted tomato plant. The stage was set for a silent siege. Within 48 hours, the first signs emerged. The tomato plant's vibrant green leaves began to sag, losing their turgor as if under a sudden invisible drought. Its stems, once firm and upright, softened and bent. The researchers noted that the soil remained moist, yet the plant appeared desperately thirsty, its vascular system failing to transport water upward from the poisoned roots. By the week's end, the plant was a wilted spectre of its former self. The leaves had curled and browned at the edges, a textbook case of what the team now formally termed walnut wilt. This was no mere coincidence or nutrient deficiency. It was a reproducible chemical kill. The mystery of the barren circle beneath the black walnut had been recreated in a pot. The mystery of walnut wilt had moved from the greenhouse to the laboratory bench. Researchers now turned their attention from wilting stems to the microscopic world, preparing thin slices of tomato root tissue that had been exposed to juglone. Under the lens, they saw a landscape of cellular distress where healthy structures had begun to collapse inward. Focusing their most powerful electron microscopes, the scientists zeroed in on the organelles within those failing root cells. The mitochondria, the tiny power plants responsible for cellular respiration, showed the clearest damage. Their normally crisp, folded inner membranes appeared swollen and ruptured like deflated balloons. This was the mechanism of death. Juglone had bound to specific proteins in the mitochondrial membrane, blocking the critical electron transport chain. Without this process, the cell could not convert oxygen and nutrients into usable energy. The root cells were effectively suffocated, starved of ATP, the fundamental currency of life. The microscopic view of suffocating cells faded, replaced by the dappled sunlight of a living arboretum. A horticulturist stood beneath the broad canopy of a mature black walnut, its leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. She gestured to the ground at her feet, where the soil lay bare in a wide circle around the massive trunk, a stark contrast to the lush grass beginning just beyond the reach of the lowest branches. She knelt, scooping up a handful of dark earth mixed with decaying walnut leaves. "This is the zone of inhibition," she explained, letting the soil sift through her fingers. Juglone seeps from the roots and leaches from this leaf litter, creating a toxic barrier in the soil. Her hand swept the perimeter where the barren ring met the thriving Kentucky bluegrass, a native species utterly unfazed by the chemical siege. The tree wasn't creating a wasteland, she clarified, but a curated space. Its biochemical defense selectively suppressed competitors like tomatoes or azaleas, plants that would vie for its water and nutrients. Meanwhile, a handful of resistant species, evolved alongside the walnut for millennia, could anchor their roots right up to the trunk, sharing the ground in a silent chemical truce. Armed with the knowledge of the walnut's toxic zone, a gardener in the late 20th century unfolded a pamphlet from their local agricultural extension service. The paper crinkled as they smoothed it across their knee, scanning columns of plant names divided into two stark categories, those that would survive near the tree and those that would not. Their finger traced down the list of the condemned: tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, azaleas, plants that would yellow and wither in the juglone-laced soil. Then it moved to the column of the resilient, hostas with their broad leaves, feathery ferns, and the cheerful bulbs of daffodils. This was the new map for their garden, drawn not by sunlight or shade, but by biochemistry. With the guide in hand, they paced out from the trunk, stepping beyond the reach of the outermost branches, the drip line where the toxic rain of leaves and husks fell. Here, in this safer ground, they began to sketch the outlines of a new bed, placing the sensitive plants well away from the tree's silent, chemical dominion. The gardener who consulted the extension pamphlet faced another dilemma: what to do with the fallen leaves and husks they'd raked from beneath their walnut tree. They couldn't risk adding fresh, toxic material directly to their vegetable beds. Instead, they piled the dark, decaying matter into a dedicated compost bin at the far corner of their property, separate from their active garden compost. Over the following months, that pile transformed. Heat built within its core as microbes and fungi went to work. The black walnut leaves, once leathery and intact, softened into a dark humus. The thick green husks around the nuts, initially potent with juglone, began to break down, their structure collapsing into the rich, earthy mass. Given a full year, or better 2, the microbial army within the compost pile accomplished what time and chemistry demand. They metabolized and dismantled the juglone molecules. What remained was a dark, crumbly, and biologically active compost, its allelopathic power spent, now safe to spread around even juglone-sensitive plants as a nutrient-rich amendment. Beyond the garden fence, in the deeper woods, the black walnut's influence created a different kind of order. A team of ecologists, their boots sinking into the leaf litter, mapped every sapling and shrub within the tree's vast shadow. Their datasheets revealed a striking pattern, a botanical dead zone encircling the trunk, where only the walnut's own seedlings and a handful of tough grasses managed to gain a foothold. The researchers knelt, brushing aside decaying husks to expose the thin, pale roots of a struggling maple sapling. Its leaves were already chlorotic, starved of energy. Here was the unseen battle. Juglone, seeping relentlessly from the parent tree, was suffocating potential rivals at the cellular level. This chemical barrage cleared the ground, eliminating competition for precious water and soil nutrients before it could even begin. This strategy sculpted the entire forest floor. The walnut did not create a barren wasteland, but a curated guild. Only plants with a genetic tolerance, like certain native sedges or the tree's own offspring, could thrive in this chemically defended territory. The allelopathy acted as a ruthless filter, ensuring the black walnut's dominion extended far beyond the reach of its branches, written silently into the very chemistry of the earth. This chemical shaping of the forest floor was not a random act of destruction. It was a precise ancient strategy. The black walnut tree, having secured its territory, now directed the growth of its own future. Its own seedlings, tolerant to juglone, could sprout in the cleared earth beneath the parent's boughs, while the roots of competitors withered away in the toxic soil. Over decades, the tree's influence radiated outward with each growing season. Spring rains washed juglone from fallen leaves into the earth. Summer heat baked the compound into the topsoil. Autumn's nut husks decayed, releasing another wave of the toxin. The cycle repeated, year after year, etching the tree's biochemical signature deeper into the land it commanded. And so the mature black walnut stood, a monarch in a self-made clearing, its vast canopy spread with the seasons, casting dappled light on a floor kept bare by its own hidden chemistry. What began as a gardener's mystery, a circle of death in the vegetable patch, was revealed as a sophisticated, silent warfare, a survival strategy written not in bark, but in the very chemistry of the soil.